Hi guys. So I had to pop in because I was scrolling on social media, which I don't even do that often anymore. There's so many disturbing things. But of course, since I'm a law of attraction coach, I see a lot of, I'm in a lot of groups that are based on law of attraction. And I have to say something because it's just disturbing me, and I don't like the misinformation being out there, and I don't want to be associated with it, to be honest. But a lot of there's some groups that are more based in spiritual bypassing. When people first learn about law of attraction, for instance, they tend to get really excited. It's like, oh my gosh, I can create my own reality, and all I have to do is think this, and this will show up, and feel this, and this will happen. But it's so much more complicated than that. You guys, I wouldn't have become a coach if it was just simple. Like we'd be done, right? Just think better thoughts. It gets really, really complicated. And the number one message I want to give you is that we cannot think our way out of contrast. What is contrast? Is experiencing something that you don't want, right? So we can have a different relationship with contrast when things inevitably happen in life. I don't care how high vibe you are. I don't care if you are just the most positive thinker on the face of this earth. I'm pretty optimistic. Bad shit still happens, okay? My mom died on Christmas Day last Christmas after suffering for many months with blood cancer. Did I cause that? That's another thing, the spiritual community, that there's not all camps, by the way, but there's a certain side of it where they say, oh, well, good vibes only, positive vibes only. And if something negative happens, somehow that's your fault. That's not true. That is not true. We cannot high vibe our way out of contrast in life. What we can do is have a different relationship with it, like I said earlier. So instead of allowing it to completely have us spiral downward and be completely helpless in life and depressed for a long time, we still need to feel feelings. We're gonna get sad when people die and pets die and we get sick. Things are going to happen. A lot of that is based on just life, right? Some of it's just out of control. That's just how life is supposed to be. We are, I do believe we are eternal beings. However, we're not meant to be in this lifetime for more than a certain amount of time, and then we move on. That's just a fact of life. So how are you going to high vibe your way out of that one? It's not going to happen. So also, pets die. Also, we have bad things happen just in life by our choices, which would be, okay, so maybe we made a decision to get married and that marriage didn't go so well. There was some contrast with it and we ended up getting divorced. Well, there is always a higher reason for things happening and choices that we make. We might have been even guided by our higher selves to marry someone because guess what? Maybe there was an amazing lesson that we would not have learned had we not gone through that experience. My marriage definitely got me ready for what I do today. I can say that it definitely laid the groundwork for, and I've been divorced quite a long time, but learning so much through what some people call negative, it's contrast. Sometimes we don't know what we want until we have what we don't want. Actually, that's most of the time. I think that's how we learn. That's how we know what we want is through experiencing the opposite of what we want. And then we're like, okay, there's some clarity. Check. Now I know what I would like to set my desire on is because I had this that didn't work out. So now let's tweak my little desires a bit because I thought I wanted such and such. Let's say you got married for a reason of security or financial reasons. Maybe this wasn't even something that you're consciously aware of. Maybe it's something that's just in your subconscious, and you end up marrying someone and have all the money in the world, but they aren't the nicest person, and you find yourself in a very controlling situation, man or woman. You know, you might have married someone for the security of maybe not finances, but just to have somebody there because you did not want to be alone. Well, then you come to find out, like, being alone might have been a better option. This person, you're in this like codependent relationship suddenly, and this person has complete power over you because you might have an insecure attachment style or something where they end up having some sort of power over you that you didn't sign up for. So what does that do for you though? That's a choice that you made. That's why the contrast happened. But then you can take that and you can make a different choice next time. And that is sometimes our higher self is putting us in these situations so that we can learn, you know, and that's why we're here, you guys, is for growth and expansion. And had you not been in that situation, even though you want to call it a bad marriage, oh my gosh, what did you learn from it? Aren't you a better person at the end of the day? Even though like you went through hell and maybe you couldn't see your way out of it in the midst of it, but in retrospect, we have the ability, if we want, to look at it as a learning experience and an opportunity instead of just a negative, hellish experience that we went through. What did you learn from your mistakes and your choices? As long as we're always growing, there really are no mistakes, in my opinion. And, you know, there's another thing with this law of attraction where, you know, okay, so someone has cancer or they get in an accident, and then someone in the spiritual community is going to say, oh my gosh, what did you do to attract that? Well, that goes back to what I was just saying. Well, maybe our higher selves attracted it for a bigger purpose that our little human brains simply aren't aware of at this time. We don't know. We don't know the big picture. Not all the time. We can make assumptions, but maybe we picked something negative as part of our journey of growth and expansion. So you never say to somebody, you know, how did you attract that, or why did you attract that? Because it's so much more complicated than that anyway. We don't only attract what we are, we attract things for so many other reasons. And there's a really long list of reasons. Another one I've talked about in previous videos, it's really complicated, is that we attract things that we judge. And all of us judge something on some level. Like I was judging liars and cheaters and, you know, people who are flaky, you know, that stuff really gets on my nerves. And so I judge it. And guess what I kept attracting? You know, I'm not a liar, I'm not a cheater, I'm not flaky, but I judge the shit out of those people. So I kept bringing that into my experience. So that's just an example of how it's not so cut and dry. There is a big picture. We are eternal beings, and there are reasons beyond our understanding of why things happen in our life. And never blame anyone. And never bypass your feelings. That spiritual bypassing is bullshit. You can't just go around saying, oh, well, you know, like if good vibes only, for instance, you know, somebody might have come to you with a problem and you're like, hey man, you're bringing me down. Can you imagine as a life coach if I was that way? You know, that no one can tell me their problems and no one can tell me to talk about contrast. Contrast is inevitable for everyone. Like I said, you do not get to high vibe your way out of contrast. That is how that is the foundation for growth and expansion. So we're going to always experience something negative. That's actually step one of attracting something new. We have something we don't want, and then we ask automatically. We don't even have to ask out loud ourselves. It just happens where inevitably we are, by having something that we don't want, that vibration goes out and we ask automatically for something more desirable. So if we're treated, if we are treated unkindly, automatically it's out there that we put it out there vibrationally that we desire someone to treat us kindly. So that's not even something we have to say out loud, although I do recommend it. I do that. I even write it down. So at the end of the day, guys, contrast is not a bad thing. It's not that you did anything wrong. If something negative happens in your life, this is part of a bigger journey. It's so much more complicated than that. And we can deal with it on a different level. Okay, so we can not completely downward spiral when something bad happens. We can look at the meaning differently. We can perceive it as a growth experience and a lesson. It can turn us into much more compassionate beings. Like, think about anything bad that's happened to you in your life. Hasn't it made you more empathetic towards other people and more compassionate towards other people? So that's something to keep in mind there, you guys. Do not be a toxically positive person where you don't allow people to talk about their problems to you. Of course, there's going to be people who are taking advantage, and I talk about them a lot, the energy vampires, and all they do is want to drain you with their negativity. However, they are not willing to ever make any real change. They just want to vent, and then they never actually take any advice, and they just continually want to drag you down and tell you their story. They're a victim, they're a victim, they're a victim. And we know people who, oh my gosh, much worse stuff has happened to them. But for some reason, they're able to pull themselves out of it. But someone in a victim role, and we've all been there. I'm not saying like, oh, they're bad people. We've all been there, but how long are you going to stay there? Eventually we got to catch ourselves and use the stuff that went awry in our lives to make the world a better place. Don't use it just to have a pity party. I don't know anybody who hasn't had negative things happen to them, and we all survive. And let's use it to be a light to others instead of spread your darkness and your stories over and over. For some of you guys, decades are still telling the same story of how you were a victim. Well, that's different. That is something that we do need to, work on and heal. But when someone's just telling you about a certain problem in their life that's currently going on, do not make them feel bad and tell them they attracted it and it's their fault, because you don't really know the reason. It's much more complicated. There's gray all over this. The law of mirroring is another name for it, and it's not black and white. Okay, so don't judge people, because guess what? The things that you judge will come to you. I can promise you that. That's part of the law of attraction, aka the law of mirroring, and no one escapes it. I hate to tell you that, but we don't get to choose that you're going to apply this law of attraction or law of mirroring. It is just there. And just as like the law of gravity, it's just an energetic thing. We basically, like attracts like. What we put out, we will get back. However, like I said earlier, it's much, much more complicated than that. That's why I'm a coach. It's a very individual thing. Some of it can be programming. Some of it can just be choices. Some of it can be our journey that we chose to go on. I believe we all have soul contracts, and we chose to experience certain things. I don't know how woo-woo what you want me to get for some of these things, but I can get pretty woo-woo on you. And let's take away that blame and accusation of, oh, well, somebody just must have unhealed things. Well, maybe they called this experience into their life as a growth opportunity. And when I say they called it in, I'm talking about their higher self. Their higher self called it to them. So they could have something going on, like, what would somebody consider a divorce. Most people consider that negative. But, maybe that's happening for a higher reason than we know of. Maybe all of that had to happen to get them where they're going to be in a future where they just can't see it yet. So that was the main thing is, I really just keep seeing this stuff on social media of people really trying to oversimplify the law of attraction. And it's not that simple, you guys. And it's not your fault if you attract something negative. Don't play the blame game. And don't beat yourself up either, by the way. It's not just other people. A lot of us we're like, oh, well, why did I attract that? Well, it's good to know that you create your own reality, but also let's think about all of the reasons, the multiple reasons that it could happen. It's a really, really long list of things that it might not be anything that you're even thinking in the moment. Some of our beliefs and our thoughts are subconscious. We don't even know. And it is good to become self-aware. And that's the whole purpose of this law, is self-awareness, right? So once you're self-aware, you also want to take different actions and make different choices. That's the whole point. That's how we grow. So I hope that made sense to you, and let me know in the comments, am I too out there? That's what woo-woo means. Am I too out there, being too esoteric? Does that make sense to you? I would love some feedback, even if it's, some constructive criticism. That's cool with me. So I hope you guys have a great day.